Welcome back to Reimagining Cyber. My name is Ben, and today we're talking about one of the most fascinating threat groups operating right now, Scattered Spider. If you followed cybersecurity news over the past couple of years, you've probably heard the name associated with major incidents involving MGM, Caesars, retailers, insurance companies, and now airlines. And with me to talk about them is Tyler Moffitt. Tyler, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Tyler, what's really interesting isn't necessarily who they're attacking, it's how they're attacking them.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about Scattered Spider again. So I kind of thought maybe late last year, they sort of got attacked. They weren't shut down completely or anything, but there were some arrests being made. And we found out that most of these guys were kids or like really, really, really young adults. Like the average age between all of them was like 19, but some of them were absolutely children. And but what's fascinating, obviously they're still going, still have a group. They combine with like Last Bus Hunters as well, and they're still. But I guess what I wanted to talk about is that they are still doing well and innovating, and they have no sophisticated malware or zero-day compromises of any major organizations. Yet they still make the news, like they have nation-state stuff. They basically just work through social engineering. I mean, these guys pioneered, I would say, the identity help desk scam where they pretend to be an employee, calling into an employee help desk and get the password reset, right? Basically just, identity attacks, abusing business process. And so, but what I want to talk to you today about is that we saw something else emerge. And that's basically that they appear to be like just pivoting and moving industry to industry. Like they're running campaigns targeting, just retail or airlines or casinos. Like they seem to be moving within the certain realm. Like they're running campaigns, and that might tell us where like cybercrime is headed, basically.
Now, for regular listeners to Reimagining Cyber, I'm sure they're well aware of who Scattered Spider are, but for those who aren't familiar with them, tell us a bit about them.
Yeah, so I guess they came into prominence maybe 2 years ago. MGM Casino. Remember, everybody remembers the casino. It was by Black Cat got the headline as the ransomware that ransomed them. But you have to realize that Black Cat had worked with Scattered Spider to get in. Scattered Spider was the one to, because ransomware is the big noisy payload that everyone jumps up and down and screams about and gets the headlines because that's the one demanding the ransom payment and all the crypto. But in order to get in the environment, a lot of the times you have somebody like, access brokers or somebody getting, that's what these guys are. Scattered Spider was the one that actually got the Black Cat ransomware in, if that makes sense. And then they've made headlines beyond that, the, help desk impersonation, MFA reset scams, tons of, identity attacks, social engineering, software as a service compromise. They're basically like, and they're native English speakers too. They don't sound foreign when they're talking, and that probably helps when you're trying to convince with social engineering, right? They're really, really good at convincing legitimate employees to help them gain access, and then once you're inside, it's game over from there. They just partner with the ransomware operator, like we talked about with Black Cat, but a lot of times they'll work with other people too. But yeah, they're really, really good at basically being the first stage in sort of, data theft and extortion.
But technical sophistication isn't necessarily their thing then.
Yeah, so I would say they're sophisticated in a different way. A lot of times, people hear sophistication and they think like some really complex, well-designed malware, like kernel level developer type stuff. And you have to realize like you don't need that. Just understanding how an organization operates and its playbook is just as powerful. If you just exploit trust and not software, it can be just as damaging.
Okay, let's talk about the pattern that we've been seeing recently. Why do researchers think that they're moving industry by industry?
Well, it's basically like it's looking like their victims it's looking less and less random. So first we saw like casinos, and then we saw major retail organizations. You guys remember like what was it? Marks and Spencer, Harrods, Co-op, like things like, and it was all like quick within a weekend or a week or something like that. And then the attention shifted towards insurance companies. And now we're seeing airlines and transportation organizations. And so when you step back, it kind of looks deliberate, like they're pivoting, and it makes total sense, to be honest.
Why?
Uh, well, they're they're becoming efficient operationally because if you think about it, if I successfully compromise one airline or whatever industry I'm in right now, right? I've learned a lot about their help desk procedures, their identity verification processes, how they onboard employees or vendor relationships, contractors too, and like the workflows for authentication. You sort of learn the skeleton of how they operate in an IT manner that would allow you access, right? And the chances that other airlines work in a similar fashion is sky high, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of building a brand new playbook every time for whatever, and there's no random targeting here. If they learn one victim in their, operational playbook behind the scenes, they can then transfer that to the next one and are able to boom, 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 hit them in a row and then pivot and change industry.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It sounds like they're not exploiting software vulnerabilities. They're exploring organizational vulnerabilities.
Basically, yeah, that's the most important part, and I would say the biggest takeaway from what these guys are doing well, for the years we've talked about software vulnerabilities, and that's being the way, and a lot of people get in. And it's still pretty big, don't get me wrong. But Scattered Spider is definitely exposing something else, business process vulnerabilities. These are not flaws in workflows. They're flaws in organizations and how they process and verify entity, like password reset procedures, support desk handling urgent requests, and the help desk, employee reset, all that stuff that they're so good at impersonating and, social engineering that they're able to get it.
Yeah, what you said just a moment ago is a really good phrase, business process vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what they've capitalized on. And I think what this episode is talking about, I guess you could say, like, if a thief or a burglar discovered that every house had this new neighborhood smart lock or whatever, and he's able to crack that one smart lock. I'm sure you've seen now people will install. They have smart doorbells now. They have smart locks, right? That will just type in a PIN or use your app on your phone, and it'll unlock the door. Well, if you got a hacker who's able to hack those devices really well, and everyone in the neighborhood's using it, he's able to get into everybody's house. And the problem isn't the house. The problem is that everyone relies on the same lock. And that's sort of, an analogy I would use to describe it.
And this feels like it ties into something that you've been saying for years and for an awful long time here on the Reimagining Cyber podcast. Identity is the new perimeter.
Yeah, no, good call. That's crucial. I mean, Scattered Spider really did, I would say, pioneer and start this sort of attack, and going around it. For years, most security is focused on like firewalls, network, perimeters, malware, endpoint protection, right? And don't get me wrong, it's all good. You got to worry about the attack surface is always growing, but modern attackers, like, they understand something a little more important. Like, if I can be you or become you, I don't need to hack around your defenses. I can just walk through the front door, just log right in, with my valid credentials that I got reset from IT. And that's why identity is so important right now, right? The attacker doesn't even need to break in now. They're treated as legitimate. And so once that happens, all these other, traditional controls are basically just far less effective.
Yeah, let's drill down a bit more into why this works so well. Why are organizations still struggling against these attacks?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, they're targeting people where their job is to literally just help others, right? Help desk, service desk, call centers, support teams. I mean, they're rewarded and their job is to solve problems, right? And attackers understand that. So that they just pretend to be some hysterical, urgently need help employee with, huge sense of urgency, which is funny enough because you're sort of trained to sort of not be scammed by urgency in emails. But when it comes to like a supposed employee who's trying to get access and is struggling, like it does go a long way, right? Especially if they try and pretend to be like a traveling executive or a locked out employee, contractor who can't access systems, or just generic, urgent, need immediate assistance. My life is on the line. Help me, IT man. The help desk wants to help. And so that's their job. And the attacker absolutely weaponizes that instinct.
Let's revisit the fact again that they move from one industry to another. Why not just stay focused on that one industry?
Well, news travels, and when somebody big gets hit, and how they got hit is usually shared, right? Especially with GDPR and CCPA and data privacy governing laws. When somebody's breached, they have to disclose how and why and whatever information they possibly have. And you betcha if they're in some specific niche industry, talking insurance, airlines, casinos, something like that, they're going to be buddy-buddy and talk to other people and be like, whoa, this is how they did it. And so they bolster. So the defenders are going to adapt, right? Once enough attacks occur, you're also going to get, policing entities, the FBI. They're going to release warnings. They're going to try and come after you and how you're going about it. The industry alerts in general that get distributed, right? And it's the procedures ultimately from this will change. And then when the procedures change, their playbook sort of crumbles, right? The success rate will drop. And so got to realize these hackers now, it's not like hackers 20, 30 years ago where it's like hacking for the fun of it or to show that they could do it. They are fundamentally business minded. They are monetization is their goal, right? And so if success rate drops and the payment drops, the return on investment drops, that's not a good business model anymore, and they pivot. Okay, so that's why we see these waves, retail, insurance, airlines, probably some other industry next. But the playbook is the same. It's just the targeting the industry changes.
Now, there may be some listeners thinking there might be an SMB. They might be thinking, well, it doesn't bother me. This only affects Fortune 500 companies. Does it?
Not at all. It absolutely applies to everyone, everywhere. If you've got an IT help desk, an SMB might not have a dedicated security team or like identity specialist or a SOC, but they definitely have password reset procedures or MFA processes or, administrative accounts or help desk workflows, things like that. Those same weaknesses still exist. The difference is usually just scale. And so, honestly, like we've talked about it, small to medium-sized businesses can sometimes be easier targets because fewer resources, easier to get in. They may make less money because they have less money to pay. But if the in and out is much faster, the return on investment might actually be greater.
Okay, then, Tyler, what should organizations actually be doing to defend against this?
So, yeah, nothing too amazingly new here, but a few things would be strengthen the identity verification process. You always want to be evaluating this. Don't rely solely on information that can be found online or through social engineering. Protect MFA enrollment and reset processes. So attackers definitely are increasingly targeting those workflows directly, right? I would implement conditional access and risk-based authentication, right? Make sure that nobody's over-permissioned, if that makes sense. Make sure the token live time of what somebody has doesn't like last the whole week. Try to keep it to a day or something. Train support teams to specifically focus on identity attacks, right? Not just phishing, like we talked about, how like we trained against urgency there, but not in a phone call. Identity attacks, it's important. So assume attackers will eventually reach your help desk. And so if you can assume that in addition to your mailbox, that's going to help, right? Design the process accordingly.
If listeners remember one thing from this episode, what should it be?
That Scattered Spider or these access brokers in general, Scattered Spider is just the biggest one, but they aren't finding software vulnerabilities. They're finding business process vulnerabilities. Okay, that's the real lesson here. And they've shown that identity is the shortest path to an organization, no matter how small or large you are. That trust can be weaponized, right? And they've shown that once the playbook works in one company, it usually works across the industry because they're very similar. So, wouldn't just ask, are our systems secure? I would ask, how would somebody convince us to let them in? Because that's the question Scattered Spider is, finding out the answers to every day.
Great discussion as always. Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, Ben. And remember, everybody listening, we've talked about it before. Identity is the new perimeter. And Scattered Spider absolutely figured that out before a lot of other defenders did. They definitely pioneered this.
Indeed, they did. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Tyler and I will be back next Wednesday. In the meantime, please rate, review, and recommend Reimagining Cyber to a friend, to a colleague, to anyone interested in the cybersecurity sphere. Thanks again. Goodbye.